Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 18th of January 2016. Welcome to UK Column News. Just after 1 o'clock. Indeed.
Yes.
Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And weather, well, it's pretty grim in Plymouth. It's been raining very heavily overnight. It's cold and unpleasant. Around the country, variable. So apparently cold and overcast in London. It's dry and bright in Norfolk, and Hampshire's not doing too badly either. So I think we'll end there on the weather, actually. Best forgotten at the moment. Well, what can we start with? Trident is probably one of the key subjects. And the Telegraph here picking up on Andrew Marr, that expert on what's going on in the world, because Andrew Marr was interviewing Jeremy Corbyn, and one of the key things that came out of this interview was that Mr. Corbyn said he would keep the Trident nuclear submarines, or keep submarines patrolling the world, but he wouldn't put any nuclear weapons on them. In order to prevent significant job losses, the Labour leader has suggested Britain could keep Trident submarines without the nuclear warheads. And the article here picking up quite rightly that this seems bizarre, to say the least. The argument seems to be, well, you've got the submarines, and as tension rises, then you could put the nuclear warheads on board the submarine. But of course, the whole point of having the submarines is once they're out there on patrol, they're undetectable. So that provides you with your nuclear deterrent. So I'm not quite sure what's in Jeremy Corbyn's mind. If we can just pop a little bit up there, a bit more up on screen. Here's one of the Trident nuclear submarines. They're talking about 28 billion to replace these, to give Britain a nuclear deterrent, but a lot of politics going on in the background. So if we don't go into the debate about whether or not we should have these things at the moment, we've got politicians coming out with these very strange remarks. In the article, I picked up that it said that Colin Talbot, Professor of Government at Manchester University, said the idea was patently daft and likened it to building a canal under the English Channel. What interested me here, Mike, was a Professor of Government. That's a pretty interesting educational title. And the idea, he likens it to building a canal under the English Channel, that just happened to come from him in the first place. So what I wanted to suggest to our viewers and listeners today is, who are these people that the papers bring forward in order to make supposedly the definitive comment on what's going on? Here's Colin Talbot. So you can go and check his page out from Manchester University. What has made him an expert in government? Well, back in the 1980s, he was a BT engineer, and then he was a member of the Post Office Engineering Union. Then he gets through to the TUC, and as he said, he ends up part of left-wing Labour, communists and Trotskyists. So this is a very interesting gentleman, but he's just drifted into the Telegraph article in order to say whether Mr. Corbyn is saying something sensible or not. What I'm principally interested in is, where do these sort of people come from? Well, he's got an unconventional career, left school at 16, various jobs, which we just heard, and then he gets involved with Manchester University, and essentially he stayed there ever since. So this man's experience of the world seems to be very largely academic, but he's also worked with a wide range of international public sector organisations in Canada, Jamaica, Mexico, Tanzania, India, Bangladesh, Japan, Hong Kong, Malta, Sweden. An expert in government, and this is the one that interests me. He's currently looking at the interface between academia and policy making through a series of studies and experimental virtual policy labs. So these are the people sitting in the background helping to create the policy that the Telegraph is then drifting in, Mike.
Yeah.
And policy labs sounds a little bit common purpose-ish to me.
Indeed.
Right.
Very civil society.
Okay, so let's get this right. Mr. Corbyn says, let's have the submarines at sea as nuclear deterrent submarines, but we won't have any nuclear weapons on them. That sounds sensible. And then the man picking him up is the man that put forward the suggestion of the canal running through the Channel Tunnel. good reporting, Telegraph.
Excellent. Okay, complete change of subject then. Financial stuff, and well, mostly related to the US presidential election because there was a leaders' debate last night for the Democratic Party. But before we get to that, we've got this open letter which has been written by 170 economists, financial experts from 100 universities and other institutions. And it's called Economists and Financial Experts in Favour of Senator Sanders' Wall Street Reforms. So they say, in our view, Senator Bernie Sanders' plan for comprehensive financial reform is critical for avoiding another too big to fail financial crisis. The senator is correct the biggest banks must be broken up and that a new 21st century Glass-Steagall Act separating investment from commercial banking must be enacted. Wall Street's largest banks are now far bigger than they were before the 2007-2008 crisis, and they still have every incentive to take excessive risks. No major Wall Street executive has been indicted for the fraudulent behaviour that led up to the 2008 crash, and fines imposed on the banks have been only a fraction of the bank's potential gains. Senator Hillary Clinton's more modest proposals do not go far enough. Given the size and political power of Wall Street, her proposals would only invite more dilution and we'll go on with that. The only way to contain Wall Street successes is with reforms sufficiently bold and public that they can't be watered down. This is why we support Senator Sanders' plan for busting up the biggest banks and resurrecting a modernised version of Glass-Steagall. Now, I don't for 1 minute believe that should Bernie Sanders be nominated as the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, and should he then become president, that he would ever implement any kind of Glass-Steagall-like legislation. But what this is doing is getting the subject in the mainstream in a way that Martin O'Malley, who's kind of the third place man there, wasn't able to do. What's really going on here, I think, is that Sanders has spied a chink in Hillary's armour and he's going for it purely for personal gain, not for anything else. I don't believe he believes in what he's saying. But nonetheless, he has commentators right across the media in a tizzy as they try to undermine the argument that banks should be split up. And this article is typical of it. Sanders, they say, is fixated. His fixation prevents him from discussing other issues that he really should be discussing, because Glass-Steagall should never really be discussed, and that's a subject that the public just doesn't need to know about, Brian. So interesting developments in the Democratic leadership race, and we'll see how it pans out. But in the meantime, I have to admit I was surprised when Sanders jumped on this particular bandwagon.
It is interesting, isn't it? But people are beginning to pick up on the fact that if we could deal with the banking, we deal with lots of the other problems. So Glass-Steagall, of course, gives the separation. Can we pin down and get back to a system where, as a nation state, we're issuing our own currency as credit? Do you think we can get there?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is David Cameron the man to sort out the country? We're not so sure. The Mail here picking up that he's earned a mere £500,000. I think that's over 5 years, renting out his Notting Hill home since becoming Prime Minister. Now, as he's been doing this, he's said in several places that he's been desperately worried that his children will be able to afford their own houses. Presumably, he's been putting a little bit of that £500,000 away for his children. We don't know. But at the same time as David Cameron's doing very nicely, a Conservative housing bill is being debated in Parliament that will end life tenancies for council houses. Now, this is one of the key things about council houses, that they were going to allow people a home for life. They did allow people and families a home for life. There was security there. But we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to sell off a large swathe of social housing. And of course, that's been going on. It's not new. This has been happening across the country through the so-called social enterprise companies. And we'll add this bit as well. Developers are then going to be allowed to build flats on the land released for up to 450,000 instead of new social housing.
Yeah, but we don't have to worry about this, Brian, because I understood we're going to start selling off hospital land soon and start building social housing on that. So surely this isn't a problem, is it?
Well, maybe, maybe, Mike, what we're going to see, just add this caption here. I think this is Animal Farm. This is the pigs organising life to their entire satisfaction, having led the revolution. Yeah, to answer your question, we have been told that the plan is that it's only the slick private hospitals that are going to be allowed to continue. The rest of the hospital and NHS infrastructure is going to be sold off for social housing. That's how it'll be sold initially, but of course we will then see the developers coming in to make huge profit out of it. So David Cameron, of course, if you noticed in that photograph, wasn't wearing a tie because he likes to make himself casual so that he's one of the ordinary people. And of course, many ordinary people in UK have also got that problem as to what to do with that £500,000.
Yes, okay, let's move on to constitutional issues then. So Telegraph here reporting that Cameron is dropping a strong hint of a new law to enshrine the British Bill of Rights. Now, we've been talking about this for quite some time. So apparently David Cameron, the Prime Minister, apparently the Telegraph had to tell us that David Cameron is the Prime Minister, and they did it a number of times through the text of this article. I thought that was quite interesting. But apparently he disclosed that ministers are looking at strengthening the powers of courts in England and Wales to overrule judgments handed down by the European Court of Human Rights. Now, of course, this is part of the EU referendum PSYOP, but nonetheless, there was one interesting comment from Cameron where he was talking about, he had said that the UK had already asserted its sovereignty, the sovereignty of Parliament in 2010 when they passed the Referendum Act. But he then went on to say, if it's necessary, we do that again to make it even more clear to people. In fact, what he said is to make it even more clearer to people. So I'm not sure that he understands English, but we might come on to that a little later. To make it even more clear to people that our Parliament is sovereign. So our Parliament is sovereign. And this is the key point here, because of course, the constitutional issue of where sovereignty lies, Parliament is insisting that it's sovereign, it has the right to do anything. And of course, that's acting beyond its authority. I don't think I need to say any more about that, do I?
Probably not, no.
But the other constitutional issue they've been talking about for ages, of course, is cities. And if you still haven't read the Core Cities article on the UK Column website, please do so. But this is the BBC. Now, I mean, the BBC claims that it is unbiased, that it is neutral, that it has to provide balanced articles. But what they've done here is they've taken a press release from the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, and they've basically just published it. This is talking about asking the questions, do big cities have more in common with each other than the rest of their own countries? Are there meaningful comparisons between cities such as New York, London and Shanghai rather than between nation states? That's the suggestion of the OECD. Such mega conurbations have bigger populations and economies than many individual countries, and the think tank argues that they face many similar challenges, whether it's in transport, housing, security, jobs, or in education. I suggest that everybody reads this article. It is very interesting because it does give a very clear concept of what they intend to do with countries with national constitutions, the move back towards feudalist city-states, and of course it is all Agenda 21 policy anyway.
Agenda 21, but underlying that, Mike, we've got the European agenda and the big push of city-states by the EU. Same agenda, just coming in from different directions. Mail on Sunday surpassed itself with shock front page. It says EU shock as the outvote storms 6% ahead in wake of Paris massacre, the Cologne sex attacks and the migrant crisis. Now on screen we've got one of the graphs that's in that article, but this was a screaming front page headline. Apparently this is a major change in status, that the outvote has moved ahead by 6 points, and it's all as a result of trouble with migration. But get into the article and you find this bizarre statement that if Boris Johnson was to take over the out campaign, it would automatically surge ahead even further. So this article, Mike, when you read through it, what are they actually talking about here? We're led to believe that all of a sudden there's been this major surge in people wanting to get out of the EU, and we are to believe that if Boris Johnson stepped in, he would be Prime Minister. Where they're going?
Yeah. EU referendum PSYOP. We've got to keep that.
An EU referendum PSYOP, indeed. Well, we just thought we would look up the company that did the survey. It's called Survation. It's a very interesting company. If you look at the people, their background, a lot of them are from the university political mould. They seem to appear out of nowhere a few years ago, and now suddenly everyone is using them. And they're boasting on the website here that they're the first to do a survey on this issue since there was the change in what the questions would be in the vote. So I'd encourage people, are we going to believe a survey of 1,100 people? Well, according to Survation, you should believe them. Who are they? What are their links, interests and objectives? Certainly wasn't clear to me having a look at the company. But the Telegraph has also been on this, and a little while ago they had this one. Obviously green, the good guys, they're the stay-in ones, and the baddies are in red, the people who want to leave. And you can see that according to them, it's about 50-50. It's miraculous how this has happened, Mike, isn't it? We've got 4 million people, sorry, that should say for UKIP, 4 million voted for UKIP. But apparently everything is very close and has been for years because people are undecided. A PSYOP, I think, without any question. Well, who's the man to trust? It's this gentleman, David Cameron, and he says that he's going to be battling hard for Britain. So he's going to be the man who's ruthlessly taking the EU to task in order to get the best benefits for us. And therefore, we don't really need this referendum because David Cameron is going to sort everything out. But I was very interested that he said he would be battling hard for Britain, because I have never forgotten David Cameron saying this, that his support for Israel is unbreakable. So if David Cameron is working for Britain, he can get a bit tough. But if he's working for Israel, there's no question of where he is. His support is absolutely unbreakable. So I'm just underlining those two words because one seems to me to be his true allegiance, and the second one is, well, Britain is second best. I'll do what I can, but if I can't do much, it doesn't really matter. Cynical maybe.
Possibly not as cynical as this. Now, this issue, I'm going to argue, isn't so much about immigration as something else. So let's see what this is about. David Cameron is saying that migrant families could be broken up and mothers deported if they fail a new English test. So this is people that are coming in on spousal settlement visas, and there's now a new English test. So if you've been in the country for 2 years, your spouse is already settled here, you decide to have children while you're here, those children are born as UK citizens. And of course, there's the possibility that if you fail the test after 2.5 years, you could be sent back to your country of origin where your children would not be entitled to reside. So the mothers would be sent off, leaving the children with the fathers to act as one-parent families. What are the chances that these fathers are going to be in a position to look after their children perfectly well? I'm going to argue that in comes social services at this point and the children taken away. What do you think? Is that a likely scenario, Brian?
Mike, I think that's absolutely the agenda. What we constantly see now is the state. We're seeing it with named person north of the border. We know that that's the agenda to come in here. The state says, you give us your children, trust us, we're going to look after them. Whilst what's going on under the surface, of course, is massive abuse of children, and principally children who are in the care system or who've disappeared the care system. And it's fascinating that while Mr. Cameron is saying, let me look after your children, we've got this sort of article by Stephen Wright in the Mail. He's crowing that the charges against Field Marshal Lord Bramall have been dropped, so he's not going to be charged over historical child sex claims. And if you read the article, Stephen Wright is laying into the police at every, wherever he can. So it's a witch hunt. It's disgraceful. They've wasted $2 million on Operation Midland. We should drop this inquiry, drop the inquiry into child abuse. Well, of course, Britain disappeared out of the equation, so nothing really came forward there. Missing files, missing dossiers, doesn't matter. Jana disappears out the equation, nothing to see there. If we add it all up, we've got lost evidence, missing dossiers, court cases dropped. We've got the police whistleblowers, no publicity for them because they're warning of the cover-ups by police and senior politicians. We've got multiple child abuse witnesses. We've got books written on abuse. We've got the complaints and the anger, but no investigative journalism from the Mail into the survivors. They just don't seem to see it's real. So we're not sure what Stephen Wright's up to, but our opinion on this article is it's closed down Operation Midland, nothing to see. Well, thanks very much to the viewer who said, well, there may be something to see because not many people know this. So let's bring in Lord Bramall again. And, well, this is his old friend Jana, apparently. Why do I say that? Because the headline from the Mail here in 2006 was that there'd been a spat between these two and Lord Bramall had hit Lord Jana after a row over comments that he made that were apparently anti-Israel. Well, of course, you can't make anti-Israel comments in Westminster, but apparently, the allegation here in print is that Lord Bramall hit Jana. But if we go to the Evening Standard, it's quite interesting because Jana ended up feeling distressed and bewildered. He just couldn't understand why somebody'd lose their temper and hit him. And this was the interesting thing. Bramall said, well, we've fixed it all. I've apologised. We're very old friends. We've corresponded since. So
what is going on?
What's going on? Old friends? Was Lord Bramall stitched up because he came out with remarks about Israel, or was there something else going on here? But what we can say is that it won't be the Daily Mail that will be investigating any of that because they want to close down the child abuse investigation. I wonder why.
Okay, this evening, as usual, being Monday night, Ian Crane will be in the studio. Humanity versus Insanity at 7:30 and Fracking Nightmare at 9 o'clock. And then Fracking Nightmare tonight, Susan Gorman-Chang will join him from Porter Ranch in California once again, where this unstoppable gas leak continues to throw methane into the air. And Steve Spy, who was arrested at the Upton anti-fracking camp on Tuesday, will be speaking about the eviction of protesters there. So join us for those two programmes, ukcolumn.org/live, beginning at 7:30.
And I'll also say, of course, Ian has got his court case coming up on the 20th, which I've no doubt...
It's Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah, which he'll be talking about. And Ian Crane would be very grateful of some public support at his court case, as always, in order to see that justice is properly done. And I'll also say that Melanie Shaw, is due in court, Magistrates Court in Nottingham, this coming Wednesday. And this is for sentence on her so-called, assault by sending flowers and that sort of thing. So Melanie would also appreciate some polite, quiet support. And isn't it remarkable that we've got the Mail calling for the close down of child abuse investigations, whereas Melanie Shaw, Mickey Summers, Bill Maloney and all the other people who've spoken out about it, absolutely no attempt at investigation or support by the police to date.
Okay. We should also mention, just before we move on, of course, it's monthly meeting, UK Column monthly meeting on Wednesday, also on Wednesday, so that's a lot happening this Wednesday in the George at Plimpton. It's beginning around 7:30 in the evening. Right, Davos, the World Economic Forum annual meeting is about to take place, begins on Wednesday again, and it's called Mastering the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And they say the world is changing at an unprecedented pace with profound implications. In global governance, the balance of power between nation states and the international framework that managed it in the last century are frayed. Adding to a shared sense of uncertainty is the emergence of a fourth industrial revolution that is distinct in its transformation of entire systems of production, distribution, and consumption, as opposed to a product or an industry. Concern is growing about the effects of digital disintermediation, advanced robotics, and the sharing economy on productivity growth, job creation, and purchasing power. Mastering the fourth industrial revolution is now a global imperative. This theme drives the design of the sessions, task forces, and private meetings at the annual meeting 2016. The World Economic Forum annual meeting provides an unparalleled platform for co-design, co-creation, and collaboration for global leaders from across business, government, international organizations, academia, and civil society to advance multiple agendas, including the global agenda, which is to improve global governance through public-private cooperation by working in close collaboration with key international organizations and providing substantial yet informal input into major multilateral processes. And so they go on: the geosecurity agenda, the economic agenda, the regional and national agenda, the industry and business agenda, and the future agenda, which is to share ideas, innovations, and discoveries that will reshape the world by engaging those at the vanguard of change from such fields as the arts, media, medicine, science, and technology, as well as the next generation of future leaders. So that all sounds really good, doesn't it? So here we go. Now, this is written by Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, what it means and how to respond. And he says, we stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to each other. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. We do not yet know just how it will unfold, but one thing is clear. The response to it must be integrated and comprehensive, involving all stakeholders of the global polity, from the public and private sectors to academia and civil society. The first industrial revolution used water and steam power to mechanize production. The second used electric power to create mass production. The third used electronics and information technology to automate production. Now, a fourth industrial revolution is building on the third, a digital revolution that's been occurring since the middle of the last century. It is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between physical, digital, and biological spheres. So what we're talking about here, Brian, in my opinion, is transhumanism. But anyway, moving on, here is the navigating the next industrial revolution. Cyber physical systems is what Industrial Revolution 4 is all about. And Schwab said there are three reasons why today's transformations represent not merely a prolongation of the third industrial revolution, but rather the arrival of a fourth and distinct one. Velocity, scope, and systems impact. The speed of current breakthroughs has no historical precedent. When compared with previous industrial revolutions, the fourth is evolving at an exponential rather than a linear pace. Moreover, it's disrupting almost every industry in every country. And the breadth and depth of these changes herald the transformation of entire systems of production, management, and governance. So Schwab has written a book on the subject. There you go, Shaping the Fourth Industrial Revolution to Benefit All, apparently. I don't think so. A new book by Klaus Schwab. And he was also speaking to the Telegraph, because, of course, a very large part of this agenda is the climate change agenda. And he was telling the Telegraph that now we have to go so he was talking about COP21, the Paris Summit, and saying we now have to go from declaration to implementation, and this is where Davos can serve as a platform. He did, by the way, admit during that interview, just as an aside, that the Brazilian banker who co-chaired last year's Davos meeting is now in prison, which is probably where they all should be.
Well, I think it's encouraging to know that we've got these super intelligent, moral people sorting out our future welfare.
Well,
or
indeed.
Not.
Well, indeed, and it probably goes a bit to explain this article. Now, I'm not sure why the Financial Times chose Donald Trump to appear on the front of this because it doesn't really reference him at all. But this is maybe he represents this informed global elite that they're talking about. But this article is talking about faith and people's faith in institutions. And what they're saying is an informed global elite now trusts institutions significantly more than the rest of the population. And what they're talking about, this is based on a survey of 33,000 people in 28 countries. And what they're talking about is that there is now a global elite of college-educated, well-read and media-savvy individuals representing 15% of the population, and that this elite has a higher level of trust in institutions than the rest. And they're presenting this almost as a positive thing. They're saying that the hypothesis is that 85% have become much more self-referential. They aren't looking outside as much as they're looking at their friends and thereby reinforcing their own views. And that was according to Richard Edelman, who's head of the Edelman PR company that ran this survey. So really what we're seeing is the split between the elitists, the global corporatists, the whatever you want to call them, the people that are bringing in this global governance agenda, and the rest of the population. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
No comments?
No comments.
Okay. What's next? Books?
Don't know what to say is the answer,
No,
Mike,
well.
because this stuff is coming in so quickly, and a lot of people are saying exactly the same to us.
Yeah.
That the picture is obvious. We've got an elitist group who believe they know what's best. We've seen these sorts of people before. Could have been the Japanese attacking China, or it could have been the work of the Nazi Party, or maybe it was even Stalin. But they always know better than ordinary people. Follow them, follow us. And where does it usually end? Death and destruction, which I think is where we're going this time round if we let it.
Well, indeed. And of course, extending the work of the Nazi Party seems to be what David Cameron is up to, because Telegraph here reporting 14 million fewer books available in libraries than in 2010 when he became Prime Minister. And of course, this is part and parcel of the cuts in library closures, cuts in funding and closures of libraries since 2010. And many people criticising this. According to the Telegraph, campaigners said Tory ministers had taken an abysmal and appalling approach to Britain's libraries and demanded that they act to stop any more closures. So that's in 2010 there were 96 million books on Britain's library shelves, and this year there are 82 million. So that's a significant fall in 5 years. Well, what can we say? I'm going to say it is an extension of this. Some people may view this as a bit of an extreme comment, but I'm going to stand by it because this is tantamount to what the Nazis did. It's what every dictatorship does as they start burning the books. Those who claim, I think, that the internet is the font of all human knowledge are deluding themselves, and we've got to get past this idea that Wikipedia is the be-all and end-all of truth, because it's far from it. And there is a lot of danger in closing libraries and so many people losing access to a lot of important information
and original information. And of course, the other thing that a lot of people are pointing out is the moment something is put in electronic form, it can be changed overnight on a global scale, whereas those original books can't. But fascinating you picked up on this, Mike, because over the weekend there was a BBC comedy programme. Now, I'm not very good on BBC stuff because I never watch it, but the particular lady was imitating Angela Merkel and a few other things. But then there was a skit about libraries, and it was about the close down of a library, two ladies in the library at the end of the day. And then they start singing and having a mini cabaret show, which is all about the fact the library is going to close. And when I watched it, I thought to myself that what I was really watching was pure propaganda to take a serious subject like the closing of libraries. And it was classic BBC. It was being made into some jokey, well, all the books are going to be replaced by Kindle and Wikipedia. This wasn't accidental. This was carefully crafted, to use that word, BBC script, trying to make the closure of libraries a jokey thing.
Somebody in the chat box here is saying that their library is mainly full of rubbish, but of course one of the key functions of a library is that if you want a book which they don't have, they will get it from you from the British Library or from some other library. So you close that library, you don't get access to that function. So
absolutely right.
yeah.
Well, we'll end on this note. This is the Evening Herald, Plymouth's local paper, boasting that Frankie Boyle, comedian, was coming to Plymouth for a show, and he was tweeting about the satanic curse of coming to Plymouth. We were just fascinated by this. This was his original tweet, which the paper published. Final tour dates: Plymouth, Blackburn, Grimsby, Croydon, like some satanic accumulator, like the text of a curse. Well, that maybe takes you in one direction, but people have been following through on this. So we've got Frankie Boyle here. This is the night where Jesus is dead and Satan is in full control of reality. Let's just try to enjoy it, bring it. I think it's supposed to be bring it on, Satan. And one down here, which starts to talk about the fact that Saudi is executing sorcerers. So I find some of this stuff very interesting, Mike. And what is in the mind of these people? Is this comedy in any shape or form?
Not sure. Having lived in Plymouth for a few years, I think I agree. It's a pretty satanic place, mind you.
Yeah. So maybe this is a gathering of the clans. If anybody can help shed some light on what this man is up to and what he's promoting, please would you let us know? Okay, well, a couple of people in the chat room have said, have we got more details of the time and location of the hearing for Ian Crane and Melanie Shaw? I'm going to say I haven't. I'm sure Ian will give more details tonight in his programme. We will give some more details for Melanie tomorrow. But support for people who are going through the court process is very, very important. And as we always say, if you're going to be there, it's being there to watch. Take notes as to what's happening to make sure that the judiciary know the public are interested, and being polite, reasonable, well behaved at all times. But I think we can do great things by showing a presence in the courts, because of course the next part of the global revolution is going to be for electronic courts where you never actually appear in a court. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's news. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Please join us then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.